All right. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on what time zone you are in. For those of you who know me, I don't really need to introduce myself. For those of you who do, thank you for participating. My name is Paul Marsh. I have been writing for Medium since 2020, and I've taken a quantum leap, so to speak, within the last 6 months. Now being invited by leadership to participate in Medium Day. So, for starters, thank you all for being a part of this call. I have two pairs I'm doing today. This one focused on racism and the micro and macro implications, and a more lighthearted one in about an hour, focusing and stressing the importance of words from a community standpoint. So you know my name now, my background a little bit. I'm originally from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, born and raised. Have done a little bit of, or an extensive amount of traveling since then. Resided in the Northeast, Philadelphia, Brooklyn. Resided in the North or Southeast, primarily Arkansas, and now residing in the Midwest. Um, I want to stress and emphasize the importance of my Northeast upbringing. For those of you who reside there, for those of you who've been there, if you've been to New York, if you've been to Boston, Baltimore, Philadelphia, DC, you know it's a very fast-paced, very hustle and bustle environment. If any of you are on this call are from the Southeast, Arkansas, Tennessee, Mississippi, Missouri, or anywhere in the quote-unquote Bible Belt, you know that it's the complete opposite. It's a lot slower. People are more kind to an extent. There's a more of an emphasis on family dynamic and familial values. Religion is its core, hence why it's called the Bible Belt. So I kind of want to emphasize that and lay that as the groundwork and preface that I am from the Northeast. I lived in the Southeast, and now I'm in the Midwest. Before I dive into the macro and and micro implications of what racism has done for me on a personal level, and how it impacts minorities all across the country and the world. So what is a macroaggression, right? What is this fancy term that this peon, who's pretty much nobody, is putting in the title? How does that apply to people on a broader scale? In layman's terms, not trying to be overly verbose, it's basically any overt aggression towards cultures, genders, races that are not a part of the mainstay in society. I've done a lot of government work in my past, and one of the things I've learned is that as of 2020, when the census was last done, the United States is home to roughly 333 million people. Everybody knows that. You hear that in school, great. Translate that into race. About 6 out of every 10 people in the United States are of Caucasian descent. 1 out of every 10 is a minority, ethnic minority from African American descent. And 3 out of 10 represents every other group in America. When I learned that fact, it dawned on me just how profound the Caucasian influence in America is, which isn't a bad thing. But again, kind of want to get back into the macro implications, right? The overt racism, the overt aggression, it's for me on a personal level being called the N word in public, having someone say something that has to do with chicken or making a joke about watermelon in passing, which are experiences that I did encounter while at the University of Arkansas. So those are the macro aggressions, right? The explicit, in your face, I don't like you, I want it to be known to you, and I don't care how you feel sort of interactions. The microaggressions, those are the ones that are more damaging, right? That's what can kind of make you feel like you're being gaslit, can make you question your serenity, your sanity, and can potentially negatively contribute to your mental health. That's pretty much anything that's subtle, right? Any form of prejudice or discrimination where you walk home, and mind you, this is not just exclusive to minorities. I'm very aware of the fact that Caucasians have and still experience atrocities at the hands of minorities. So it's a double-edged sword, focusing exclusively or primarily rather on the Caucasian to minority implications, but making sure that I don't focus exclusively on that and make it seem as if Caucasians are a problem. I have several Caucasian friends. I've dated several Caucasian girls. I'm not that type of person. However, I have encountered several subtle forms of racism, of discrimination, that have gotten in the way of my ability to thrive on a personal and a professional level. I'm just giving you a couple of examples because you know the terms now, you have my background. I wrote an article. I did not expect to generate the level of success, the level of views, the level of revenue, not that that's necessarily the focal point. It did, titled What Living in Arkansas for 5 Years Taught Me About Modern Racism. And so to not necessarily beat a dead horse and to unpack everything that story has, I basically, making a long story short, talked about how I went from the Northeast, which, there is racism. I read the comments. I'm one of those authors who interacts with their readers. and saw that, certain parts of upstate New York, Montauk area, Suffolk County, certain parts of the Northeast and the Atlantic coast, specifically Virginia, and then North Carolina, the Carolinas and whatnot. There is a lot of racism. There are a lot of issues specific to the Northeast. So racism is not exclusive to the Southeast. It's not exclusive to the Midwest. It's a national and international epidemic. However, with that being said, in Philadelphia, the racism I encountered, it wasn't necessarily the type that I encountered in Arkansas. It was kids growing up, bantering, making jokes, teasing you, complaining or saying things like, "Hey man, you might be mad at dark chocolate." It was never things that made me feel hurt or made me feel concerned or made me feel afraid in my own skin. While working at Amazon in the Midwest, kind of getting back to what I was talking about earlier, bringing things full circle, Amazon, while I worked there, brought me to the Midwest to open the first Central Illinois delivery station. So to make a long story short, whenever you get a package from Amazon, you get an alert saying, "Hey, your package is out for delivery." It was my job to make sure that the entire Midwest, Central Illinois region specifically, was taken care of. Because of the magnitude and the seriousness of this role, Amazon made sure to do a colorblind hiring process. No seeing what I look like, just hearing my voice and making sure that there is no implicit or explicit bias from any of the hiring managers. So I go through the entire process. 7 interviews later, I get the job. I leave Arkansas, which is a breath of fresh air for me, no longer being in a predominantly racist and yet ironically Christian religious centered environment. I'm now in the Midwest. I'm now in a place where I'm happier. And the very first day when I arrived, when they saw Paul Marsh is not a Caucasian man, right? Paul Marsh isn't using these educated, more advanced words. He's in person, and we can see that he's an ethnic minority, and he's a darker hued minority, right? No knock to Jason Tatum or LaMelo Ball or Drager or Childish Gambino or any of these other individuals who are ethnic minorities you may be familiar with. But I'm more on the Michael Blackson side of the spectrum, right? The Lupita Nyong'o side of the spectrum. And there are Caucasians, for whatever reason, who, when they see my color, when they see my initial what you see, right? It's the response is no longer about my character. It's no longer about the content of who I am. It's solely based on what I look like. That made my 3 months with the company very contentious, not because I was a bad employee, not because I was slacking, not because I failed to oversee the 400 people they put me in charge of. It solely became, we have preconceived notions, biases, and perceptions about Black people. And so rather than give you a chance to be viewed as a human being, we're going to view you through this narrow-minded, very, very tunnel vision sort of perspective. And when we see something in line with what we believe, that then confirms how we perceive you. When we don't, it doesn't matter. So long story short, I got to a point where I decided it was in my best interest to focus more on my academics and my master's degree and less on pursuing a job where I thought I was making 6 figures at a young age. I knew that the income wouldn't be worth the issues that I encountered. I felt as though I was kind of selling my soul in a sense. And I can go into a lot more detail and throw a lot more examples at you guys, but I'm the type of person who, when I talk this much, I need to take a break at some point. And so I'm going to stop there and open it up to the audience to respond with any comments or questions before I continue. Then I'll talk a little bit more about the implications on a personal level, get into a call to action, and open the floor up to any additional questions. I don't see any popping up, so I'll just proceed. So the implications, right? So you know a lot about my background, you know about the micro and macro implications of racism. You have an example of what I went through and how it potentially impacted me. What has life been like in light of these interactions, right? In light of everything I went through at Amazon, in light of the experiences I had in the South, in light of life now in the Midwest, now that I'm a fully independent, full-time writer, career consultant, and aspiring comedian. I have PTSD, documented PTSD, right? This is not me opening my mouth and vocalizing something without the proper medical evaluation. PTSD from a lot of different experiences in life, and I can go into detail about them, but it's a sob story, foster care, and losing parents, and all kinds of abuse and whatnot. None of that did as much damage to me as the mental and the emotional implications and the toll of racism. I went from this super happy-go-lucky, the glass is half full type of person in relation to interacting specifically with Caucasian Americans to now having a heightened sense of trepidation and concern and fear. It's not animosity, it's not hatred, there are no grudges. It's more so, is this person I'm interacting with, or is this person I'm looking with, is this person who I'm potentially going to talk to, especially when they're a lighter human being? Will they see me the way I see them? Put my color to the side, put my characteristics aside, put the fact that I wear chains and have dreads aside, and actually listen to me, engage with me as a human being, see that I have something to offer, or am I going to be relegated to some sort of inferior, subservient position from a societal standpoint simply because I was born with more melanin? I didn't go to the drawing board and say, hey, God, or hey, Howard, higher power, hey, universe, I would exclusively like to be this color, aware of how the world works, aware of the fact that there are people who are going to see me and downplay me, aware of the fact that when it comes to jobs, I'll have the propensity to get into the door. And then once the hiring managers meet me, I figure out whether or not being an ethnic minority is a good thing or a bad thing. Kind of getting back to those subtle implications. You walk in the door. So you're Paul Marsh. That's not the way you want to start an interview, right? And so those are some of the implications of what I've experienced on a personal level. And as I've traveled throughout the country, as I've been in the Pacific Northwest and the South, or Pacific Northwest and the Southwest, as I've been in the Midwest and the Northeast and Southeast, I have seen that no matter what your color is, what your creed is, if you're an ethnic minority in the United States, for some reason, in some capacity, you are a societal scapegoat. More likely than not, in the eyes of Caucasians, you're relegated, like I already mentioned, to a subservient inferior status because you're more melanated. And so the call to action, I would love anyone on here, Caucasian specifically, but anybody who's open-minded enough, actually start to engage with your minority friends. If I had $1 for every person who met me initially and realized that I don't embrace the negative stereotypes attributed to African-American men exclusively, beyond my initial appearance, tattoos, earrings, chains, dreads, snapbacks, but master's degree, connections to very prominent people, a desire to continue to network and to raise awareness on how important it is to get past any preconceived notions, to get past any biases you have, and actually do the hard work of interacting and talking to your Black friends. I was very touched back in 2020 when I saw the global outpouring for the Black Lives Matter movement, specifically in France and Europe, when they took a stand and said that Black Lives Matter and everybody's rallying. But in the back of my mind, I asked myself, how long is this going to last? Is this going to be a fad? Something that's the new trend? Oh, Black people now matter because it's in, it's trending, so now they matter. Now I'll go on social media and post about them. Now I want to interact with them because having a Black friend is a form of social currency. Is that where you are as a person? Or do you honestly care about being able to get outside of your comfort zone, do the hard work, and interact with people who may not look like you, but can broaden your horizons? There's a gentleman on this call, I'll give him a shout out, Mr. Wayne Schmucker, much older than me, someone who I would not necessarily, from a superficial surface level standpoint, have a relationship with. But because I've been able to get outside my comfort zone, because I've been able to say to myself, it's not about only hanging out with Black people who listen to rap and R&B and 90s music. I'm able to broaden my horizons, do things. I've listened to Led Zeppelin and the Imagine Dragons. And it's just become more of a comprehensive, holistic, well-rounded individual. And so that's my call to action for anyone on this panel. Thank you for being present. But ask yourself, being very direct and being very blunt, are you the type of person who cares about us because we're trending, or do you honestly want to see holistic racial equilibrium across the board? America was never, and this is my own personal prerogative, I'm not getting into politics, it hasn't been great because not every minority group has been given full access to the liberties and the privileges afforded to Caucasians. I'm very privileged in the sense that though I have gone through a lot, I'm still on this call. I got to see comments from Mr. Tony Stubblebine, if I pronounced that correctly, the CEO of the company. And so I find myself in a very privileged position. I want to see this for more minorities, for more people across the country and the world. And so are you the type to truly interact with us because you care, or are you the type to interact because we kind of are trending now? That is where I'll leave things. Please, if you have any comments, feel free to jump into the section. If you have anything you'd like to share, go ahead. Otherwise, I will leave it open for a little bit and then prep for my more lighthearted, humor-based panel. There the comments go. Okay, Post, Keepy, New York. Grew up in Reading. Hey, I used to live in Reading. I have family in Reading and New York and all the way out in Pittsburgh and then State College because I was supposed to go to Penn State, but opted to leave Pennsylvania, which I don't regret, but sometimes regret. I live in the Bible Belt, also known as the Rust Belt and the Flyovers. Raise your hand if you've ever been told to smile more. Okay. So note to self, do not go full screen next time. Detroit, hello from Huntington Beach, California. All right, I put the webinar on microaggressions from an LGBTQ plus perspective. Interesting. We mentioned that using displaying pronouns was a welcoming gesture. The hostility was breathtaking, but not expected, not a mistake, but a conscious decision to resist inclusion. It's interesting that you mentioned the LGBTQ plus community. As someone who grew up in Philadelphia before it became mainstream, before you see the kind of the public outpour that currently exists from an LGBTQ standpoint, I was exposed to that community. I remember my first transfer and kind of telling me, there's no difference between me and you. I just like a very different type of person, but we still get typecast because, we're not the mainstream. We're not WASP. We're not white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant men. We don't have a European ancestry. And if we do, it's forced. It wasn't chosen. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that, Miss Lauren B. I'm not going to try to butcher your last name. As a white, cisgender white man, I believe it's my responsibility to continue to learn about and recognize the symptoms of racism and the institutions that support keeping persons of color from opportunity and advancement. Thank you, Mr. Norman Bishop. In the article, I actually saw a very robust outpour of positive comments, but at the same time, I asked myself, how many of these Caucasians have taken an active stance in trying to thwart, mitigate, and negate these micro and macro aggressions? Are you kind of like dry snitching, so to speak, on these people now to kind of feel better about yourself and clear your conscience? Or are you actually talking about something that you did where you took actionable steps to make the lives of the people involved better? Racism and is black people's burden, but is white people's problem. Thank you very, very much. I agree with that. In regards to the advice of getting to know some black people, while I make that effort, it often comes across as too purposeful. If that makes sense. When that happens, I end up offending the people I'm talking to. Any suggestions on how to show support without being about? Yes, I love that question. Thank you so much, Molly. So in Arkansas specifically, I had a chance to play for the Razorbacks. I decided I didn't want to take it because I didn't like the amount of attention that it would have brought me. One of my friends at the time, Brandon Allen, he was the quarterback. Just to give you perspective, they lost to Alabama or some other SEC school, and then in the South, the SEC is a big deal, and his car got burned. So the only reason I preface that is because there were people who saw me and their desire to interact with me was solely based on social currency, what I have to offer, what I can give you, not what's mutually beneficial. And so it made it very easy to kind of sift through. And the Caucasians, anybody who came to me and said, hey, I see that you have the Razorback backpack, but you don't have the name badge and blah, 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 blah. And from there, I was able to see, so you want to interact with me because I'm playing basketball. And so now the conversation is all about sports and that. It's not about who I am as a person. That's not something we enjoy as black people. Another thing we don't enjoy, especially when a Caucasian wants to get to know us, is when you come to us with things that are stereotypical attributes, but then you act as if it's something that you've discovered. Well, my next door neighbor came over. We don't have a relationship anymore, primarily because of this. I'm from Philly. Kensington is an environment in the Northeast Philly area that's very dilapidated, very dangerous. And it kind of became a conversation that centered around, look what I found, isn't this cool? And all these black people, you know what, we don't like that. I don't like being asked if I'm a basketball player to this day because I'm 6'4". I don't like the first thing a Caucasian wants to show me being a rapper or an R&B artist. I'm more cultured than that. Let's talk about Led Zeppelin. Can we have a conversation about the 80s? What happened to John Mayer? Where is Jack Johnson? You know what I mean? Like, those things matter. And so to kind of answer your question, I think it's not necessarily about your intent so much as your delivery. What exactly are you trying to do to interact with them? And do you have the cultural sensitivity to understand that while you may have a good intent, certain things for us are just a no-go? If someone is trying to intimidate you, then you have already intimidated them. Black people are an economic threat because of the creative power and pivot, which is unprecedented. All right, if I don't get off this call, then I'm going to be in these comments all day. I have to prep more for this comedy panel. Not trying to be a shameless plug. 6 p.m. I'm making it all about Medium Day, which is emphasizing human connection and written communication and words. So I will bid you all adieu, unless there are any more final comments coming in. James Baldwin is one of my favorite authors, so I have to read this. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. Well said. Butchered by me, but well said. If you're white, here's what to do: become an Airbnb host. Yes, but don't be the type, and I experienced this, where you're a host and you become passive aggressive, checking in with your black or your Hispanic, Latinx, Lisi, whatever it is, and Airbnb. Hey, Paul, just want to check in. How things going? Are you following the house rules, et cetera, et cetera? And my response is, do you respond to this way to all of your clientele, or just the black ones? Complete end of the conversation. So please, don't be that type of Airbnb host where you're hosting, but you're secretly trying to like watch us, especially if you have a security system like Ring, whatever. Invite people into your home, yes, and make sure that you're not like the people. Rest in peace, and Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia, who see a minority, and whether he's running or he's coming to your door, you allow fear or whatever it is that causes Caucasians or anyone to see us and respond from a fear-based standpoint and not a human-based standpoint, and then allow it to impact you. I shot 2 years ago going to a lady's home who knew I was coming but didn't know I was black, and responded accordingly. So if you listen to your home, please keep these things into mind. I see no more comments. So that is where I will end. Thank you so much for everyone who attended. Thank you, Mr. Stubble Byron. If I'm butchering that, I apologize. I'm grateful you hopped on the call. Mr. Schmucker, I will hop into your DMs personally at the end after everything is said and done. I sincerely appreciate you all. Thank you for giving me the platform medium to talk about this. Thank you for everyone who's been a part of this. Now, if you excuse me, I need to transition into something more lighthearted. My name is Paul Marsh. If you're interested, you can find me on all the adult-based social media. No TikTok, no Instagram, LinkedIn, Medium, things of those nature. I appreciate you all. If you hop on the next call, great. If not, take care. And I hope you learned something that you can use to positively better your life and the life of those around you. Take care.